When you picture an ancient Buddhist monk, you probably imagine, a solitary figure meditating quietly on some misty mountain, totally detached from the material world. You're probably not picturing a highly structured community grappling with complex inheritance laws, healthcare funding, and exactly how many gallons a copper pot holds. Welcome to this explainer. Today, we are going to completely shatter your stereotypes of ancient monastic life. We're exploring the surprisingly complex legal, administrative, and healthcare systems hidden within an ancient source text known as the 10 Recitations Vinaya. It's a truly fascinating look at how a spiritual community dealt with very human problems.
Here's how we're breaking this down today. First, we'll look at the Sangha's property system. Then, the meticulous handling of belongings. Third, the story of the Buddha washing the sick monk. And finally, their ancient patient care guide.
So let's jump right into part 1, the Sangha's property system. Prepare to be a little amazed here, because the financial and property frameworks governing these ancient monastic communities were unbelievably precise. These monks didn't just casually accept donations in some free-for-all, pass-the-hat kind of way. Nope. The source text actually outlines 8 strictly codified categories for allocating property, known as the 8 types of offerings. We're talking designations by boundary, residency, restriction, provision, you name it. If a layperson donated robes or food, the community had strict rules dictating exactly who got a share. It depended on where you lived, what time of year it was, like during the summer retreat, and whether you were physically present at the time. Honestly, it reads a lot like modern corporate compensation or tax allocation rules. Now, you might be wondering, why go through all this bureaucratic trouble? Like, why not just share everything equally and call it a day? Well, these strict community resource management laws were absolutely essential simply because of scale. To put it in perspective, the source text explicitly mentions massive assemblies of up to 1,250 monks gathering together in a single location. That's a huge crowd. When you have a community that large, relying entirely on donations just to survive, you absolutely need rigorous legal organization. Otherwise, you're looking at chaos, resentment, and serious inequality. Which brings us to Section 2, the meticulous handling of belongings. This naturally leads us to a really fascinating administrative challenge. What actually happens to a monk's belongings when they pass away? You might assume monks owned absolutely nothing, but as we see in this explainer, while their possessions were definitely limited, they did have them. And the ancient community had highly specific, legally binding procedures for handling a deceased monk's estate. It's basically ancient monastic probate law. This completely illustrates their meticulous bureaucracy. They separated a deceased monk's estate into 2 distinct legal categories. First, you have light items. These are personal, divisible things. Robes, shaving razors, needles, and yes, even shoelaces. These could be inherited or divided up among the other monks. But then you have heavy items. These were indivisible institutional assets. We're talking land, beds, vehicles, and, amazingly specifically, iron or copper pots that hold over 2 du, which is an ancient unit of measurement. These heavy items absolutely could not be divided up. They had to remain with the monastery as communal property. So, the crucial point here is that they followed a very strict, step-by-step procedure to settle the estate. When a monk died, the community would gather. Step 1, identify the primary caretaker. Step 2, award that caretaker the 6 essential monastic items, things like the primary robes and bowl. This was a direct reward for their service. Only then, in Step 3, would they divide the remaining light items among the monks who were present. And finally, Step 4, retain those heavy items for the wider community. It's really a beautifully structured system, right? Designed to reward compassion while firmly protecting institutional assets. Moving right along to Section 3, Buddha washes the sick monk. Let's look at how this evolves from a dry legal manual into a deeply moving human narrative. Because let's be real, laws, no matter how perfectly written, are only as good as the humans enforcing them. Despite all these meticulous rules for dividing up robes and bowls, we have to ask the hard question. What happens when the human element of a community completely breaks down? What happens when empathy just vanishes? Well, the source text provides a pretty shocking anecdote that answers exactly that. One day, the Buddha himself is inspecting the living quarters. He opens a door and discovers a severely ill, helpless monk lying in his own waste. He has been completely, totally abandoned by his peers. When the Buddha asks why no one is helping him, the sick monk admits that because he was quote-unquote lazy and didn't help others when he was healthy, the other monks are flat-out refusing to care for him now that he's sick. It goes to show that ancient monks were just as susceptible to petty grievances and a lack of empathy as anyone else today. But in response, the Buddha doesn't just stand there and give a lecture. He personally bathes the monk, cleans his room, washes his soiled clothes, and gets him fresh ones. Following this whole event, the Buddha gathers the community and delivers a massive reprimand. He says, "In my Dharma, you have no parents or siblings. If you do not care for one another, who will care for you?" This powerful quote is really the emotional anchor of our whole analysis. It shows the exact moment the Buddha realized that if compassion wasn't formally codified into monastic law, vulnerable people would literally be left to die over petty grudges. Empathy had to become a rule. Which brings us to our final section, Part 4, Ancient Patient Care Guide. That profound realization birthed what is essentially a surprisingly modern ancient healthcare manual. The Buddha immediately established rules mandating the care of the sick. The Vinaya instituted these mandatory steps for caretakers, proving that true empathy required tangible, organized action. Step 1, you must consult a physician or a knowledgeable monk to find the right medicine. Step 2, you must prepare or specifically seek out the food the patient needs. Step 3 is absolutely incredible. If there are no funds for medicine, the caretaker is legally authorized to trade the sick monk's heavy items for lighter ones, or even trade iron bowls for clay ones, just to free up funds to pay for medical care. And Step 4, preach the Dharma to provide psychological and spiritual comfort. They practically invented a healthcare protocol right then and there. Furthermore, the text offers some incredible psychological insights. It actually lists out the 5 traits of an easy patient versus a difficult patient. An easy patient takes their medicine, manages their diet, communicates their symptoms, and stays calm. A difficult patient, they're angry, they refuse their medicine, ignore dietary restrictions, and absolutely won't tell you what hurts. This mirrors the exact challenges healthcare workers face today, right? The text openly acknowledges that caring for the sick is incredibly hard, frustrating work, but it mandates it anyway. And it equally scrutinizes the caretakers. A good caretaker is patient, knows about medical diets, is willing to clean up waste, and provides comfort. A bad caretaker is disgusted by bodily fluids, lacks medical knowledge, is impatient, or, and this is super revealing, is only caring for the sick monk to get their hands on the inheritance we discussed earlier. The text explicitly states that a caretaker working just for material gain is entirely unfit for the job. They understood human nature perfectly. As we wrap up this explainer on the ancient 10 recitations Vinaya, we've seen a world that was heavily bureaucratized, yet ultimately grounded in an absolute mandate for human empathy. So I'm going to leave you with this provocative thought to consider. Do our own modern social safety nets and healthcare systems successfully balance meticulous legal organization with this level of mandated, hands-on human compassion? It's definitely something to think about. Thanks for joining me on this deep dive, and keep seeking to understand the fascinating structures of our world.